All right, it is just after 9 o'clock, and that must mean it's time for coffee hour. I see the Zoom room is filling up. As always, we invite you to tell us who you are and where you're zooming in from. Drop that information in the chat. We have a fantastic guest today lined up. Jay Paterno is joining us, and he's going to talk about his life as a Penn Stater. He's going to talk about his new book that he has out. And so we look forward to sharing his story with you all this morning. If you have a question for Jay, you could drop that in the Q&A tab. I know many of you submitted questions beforehand, and we're going to try to get to as many of those as we possibly can. It's great to see everybody. I see Dave McClung in Avalon, New Jersey. Avalon's a place I know the Paternos have spent a lot of time. I see Guillermo down in Puerto Rico and Grace from Central Iowa. Good to see you, Sandy. And I see Michael from New Jersey and James Bell and Joe Shalaba from Huntington, Elizabeth King with the Puget Sound chapter. We have over 140 people in the Zoom room today, many more joining us on Facebook Live, and we are going to get started in just a minute. I see a number of people like Mark Hunsick joining us from a snowy Happy Valley, and Kelly Greco from down in Charlotte. Oh, somebody chiming in from North Pole, Alaska. I hope the mail service is working well up there this time of year, Sherry. I know we've had some mail problems through October and December, but it looks like those might be behind us so that we can get all of our holiday mail up there to the North Pole for those who send mail that direction this time of year. Jeff Ballou down in DC, good to see you. And Philip Barnes from Windsor, Virginia. Thank you for joining us. We'll get started in just a minute. I see Joy and Pat and Ed and Todd. Welcome to Coffee Hour. Danity Miller Boyle from Lehighton, Pennsylvania. A great volunteer up there. Good to see you, Danity. Where else would you rather be than a Zoom full of Penn Staters? I'm Paul Clifford, CEO of the Penn State Alumni Association, and welcome to the Alumni Association's Coffee Hour. Each week here on Coffee Hour, you can expect to hear the voices of Penn Staters talking about what they're passionate about. And you can expect to feel the pride and the power of the Penn State network. Just as a reminder, we are recording this session and closed captions are available for this event. You can find information in the chat or in the chat in Zoom or in the comments in Facebook on how you can customize your caption experience if you choose to do so. Today, we're going to talk with Jay Paterno, a guy who needs no introduction, but I will give him one. Jay is an author and consultant as well as a member of Penn State's Board of Trustees. He also appears on television for the Blue White Tailgate Show and writes for statecollege.com and his own Pigskin Stew Football Blog. You can find that blog on jvpaterno.com. In 2020, he followed up his best-selling book, Paternal Legacy, with the novel Hot Seat, A Year Inside College Football's Pressure Cooker. The novel was inspired by his 22 seasons of coaching college football, including 17 right here at his alma mater, Penn State. I'm excited to welcome Jay Paterno to Coffee Hour. Jay, how are you this morning?
Let me start the video. I'm doing great. How about you?
I'm doing fantastic. Thanks for joining us.
I should just walk down to your, Paul, I should just walk down to your house.
I know that.
We're in the same neighborhood.
Right here in the same neighborhood. And yet I think we see each other more on Zoom nowadays than we do even walking around the neighborhood.
Yeah, that's probably true.
Yeah, it's good to see you. So let's start at the very beginning. After growing up here in State College, did you even consider going somewhere else? How did you become a Penn State Nittany Lion?
Yeah, I consider going some other places. And then I looked at the applications, and like my dad talked to me about going to Brown, and there were like 12 essays. And I'm like, do I really want to go to Brown or want to go to Penn State? And Penn State had no essay at the time. So, you know what? This is where I want to be. I'm going to Penn State. I love it here. But it was good to leave after college for a while before I came back. But just, I mean, it's home. It's the best school on the planet as far as I'm concerned.
Absolutely. So while at Penn State, we know the role you played on the football team here, but were you active in other activities on campus outside of football?
I actually, not that many because football took up so much time, but the spring of my last year here, I wrote a column every 2 weeks for the Collegian. And I remember the first columnist meeting, and everybody introduced themselves. And one of the girls that was also writing a column that semester said, "Wait a minute, don't you play football?" I said, "Well, not anymore." She goes, "And you're going to write?" And I took that. I was kind of insulted. So I said, "Okay, I'll show you." And, wrote a couple of columns that were not terrible. And, she grudgingly gave me some respect.
That's awesome. Well, hey, just like you had to earn respect on the football field, you had to earn it in the writing room, I guess, too.
Yes, absolutely. In fact, it's harder to write than play football. I can tell you that right now.
Hey, after graduating Penn State, you mentioned that you left Happy Valley. You graduated with a BA in social and political science, and then you left to start your coaching career. Why was it important for you to leave and coach elsewhere before returning?
Just to learn. I mean, I went to University of Virginia as a graduate assistant, which was a great university, obviously. And had I not done that, I would not have met my wife. So that worked out pretty well. But I coached for George Welsh. He was a College Hall of Fame coach. Great. I learned a ton from him. Went to University of Connecticut, went to James Madison University. And just really, it was important to get other perspectives, to see other areas, and also to kind of forge your own path before I came back here.
It's interesting. You mentioned George Welsh. I grew up in northeastern Pennsylvania, and so I know George Welsh. I married a girl from Schuylkill County, and that's where George is from. I believe he's from Ashland, if I'm not mistaken.
I think Coaldale.
Coaldale. Okay.
Yeah, Coaldale.
That's where the hospital is that everybody where my wife grew up goes to, the Coaldale Hospital. But he was a legend in college football down there at the University of Virginia.
No question. And really, what my dad used to refer to him, Joe used to say, George Welsh was one of the best judges of talent he'd ever been around. And he did a pretty good job. He recruited Franco Harris and Lydell Mitchell. So that worked out pretty well too.
Absolutely. As I hear, and as we were talking offline just before this, our paths have crossed a number of different places, maybe not at the same time, but we've both lived in Harrisonburg, Virginia. I worked at JMU early in my career, as you just mentioned, and then I spent 4 years up at the University of Connecticut as well. And two great places to live, two places that have changed an awful lot since the times that we were there.
No doubt about it. I was up at UConn just not too long ago and couldn't believe the change.
Yeah.
But the same thing, living here, when I left Penn State for 5 years and came back, where all these buildings come from? And every time you turn around, there's more things going on. And it's obviously a campus that is still in motion and still ever evolving here. And I see that a lot now on the Board of Trustees when we're looking at the master plan and some of the things that we have for the future.
Yeah. So you returned to coach here, and we could just spend hours talking about that. But I know we both have a lot of things that we want to get to in this conversation, but talk about maybe what your most memorable experience was there. Maybe something that is a little bit behind the scenes that maybe didn't get talked about as much publicly, but is one of the most memorable experiences that you have that keep coming back to you about your time on the coaching staff here at Penn State.
It's hard to narrow it down, but I'll tell you a funny story. So in 2010, Joe was closing in on his 400th win, and I'm a student of the game. I love the history of the game, and so I knew it was kind of a big deal. He was going to get to 400. So we beat Michigan the week before. That's right. For $3.99. And Guido D'Elia had said, "Hey, look, just so you know, next week, if we win, they're going to do something after the game. You probably want to make sure your family's here. So I said something to my mom. I said, my sister Diane was in town. I said, is she coming back up next week? And my mom said, why? Why would she come up? I said, well, it could be the 400th win, Dad's 400th win. And she said, is that a big deal? I said, yeah, it's a really big deal. So she said, well, you better tell her. So I called my sister, or my sister was at the house. It was after the game, Michigan game. I said, you coming back up next week? She said, no. Why? I said, well, it's the 400th win. She said, well, is that a big deal? I said, it's a really big deal. I said, you're going to want to be here for it, the whole 9 yards. If we win, she goes, well, we're going to win. I said, oh, we're playing Northwestern, I guarantee it. And she said, well, we better win because if I'm not going to make this a road show every week. And so for those that remember the game, with about 50 seconds to go in the first half, Northwestern went up 21-0.
Yeah.
And I just said, oh God, my sister's going to kill me. Yeah. And then we got the ball back on our own 8-yard line after a penalty. And I said to Bill Kenny, I said, see if Joe wants to get in the 2-minute drill. We'll run the draw. If we make a first down, we'll get in the 2 minutes, see if we can get something. And Joe says to Bill Kenny, sure, everything else is working great. You know, we're down 21-0, so why not? And we went 92 yards in 48 seconds, and the rest is history. He scored 35 straight points. So, but after that game was just a magical night. I mean, it was just one of those games. The crowd was electric. Joe was just really moved, and it was really something special.
Yeah. You know, I hear you, I've heard you talk about it. I've heard your mom talk about it, but the Paterno household after a football game, especially after a win, is a pretty special place. Can you give us a peek inside what the house might be like Saturday after a game?
Well, you know, my mom used to, and what a lot of people don't realize is my mom for years would make dinner for people after the game. But, you know, when I say people, it could be 65, 70 people. Right. And it was generally donors for the library or liberal arts or a number of things, not athletics, mostly for other projects that they were involved in. And so they developed a great rapport with a number of donors over the years, and then got a lot of money out of them. So you would go to the house and you might see Phil Knight, you might see Quentin Wood, who was the CEO of Quaker State. You might see Merrill Lynch, CEO Bill Schreier. I mean, there were millionaires and billionaires there, but there were also other people there. And it was just really a fascinating place. And I was smart enough, and in college, to go back to the house after the games because there was free food there. Right. But also shut my mouth and listen to some of these people and learn from some of them. But it was really a lot of fun. Even after losses, it was the mood. Obviously people were down about the loss, but a lot of people getting together about the love of Penn State. And my mom is a meticulous record keeper, and she can tell you who was there even now if you go through the records after this game or that game. And about 10 years ago, they went through the records and started adding up all the money that the people had been there had donated over the years, and it topped $1 billion with a B. So that tells you how effective some of those things may have been.
Unbelievable. Prolific fundraisers for the university throughout their career. Also back that up with a great deal of philanthropy on their part as well. I always tell the story when I'm in front of a group that, if Coach Paterno were here tonight, he'd say, we have all the money that we need tonight here in the room. That's the good news. The bad news is that it's still in your pockets. And so we're going to need you all to give it to us.
Absolutely. He used that all the time. Say, we got the money. The good news, you got the money. Bad news in your pockets. And then he would also tell donors when it came to football, we want your money, but not your 2 cents. Exactly. And that I've used that a bunch of times.
Exactly. This is the Penn State Alumni Association's Coffee Hour. I'm Paul Clifford. I'm joined today by University trustee and author Jay Paterno. Jay, let's talk about your role as a trustee of the university. From your perspective, what are some of the biggest challenges that we're facing as an institution today?
Well, short term, COVID-19 is a major challenge. And starting in March, we were on calls every week to discuss plans, thoughts, how we're going to handle this, bringing students back. And to the credit of this administration, they did a good job with their plan. And right before the semester started, I said, you guys got a great game plan. But again, much like coaching football, you're relying on the execution of 18 to 22-year-olds to execute that plan. Right. But to credit our students' credit, they really did a good job, and they got to Thanksgiving without us having to go fully remote. So that's certainly a challenge, and that's not going to go away immediately. Obviously there's good news on the vaccine front, but long term, I think we're looking at what is the future of higher education going to be.
Right.
With the ability to deliver it remotely, are people going to get more comfortable with that? Are they going to come to Penn State for 4 years? Are they going to spend 2 years on World Campus? Or how is that all going to evolve? And I think that's one of the big challenges. And if it evolves into more remote education, are we right to be building giant facilities in terms of labs and things? So that's a constant battle of what we're doing. State funding is always a challenge for us.
Right.
So we're going to have to become much more efficient in things that we do. And we're looking at some, if you look at the next couple of years, Dr. Barron's contract is up in 2 years. So there may be a transition there, and that's going to be a big deal. And as you look at his senior leadership, many of them are nearing retirement age. So there are going to be a lot of things we have to deal with in terms of the future leadership of this university.
Absolutely. Jay, I'm thinking about your answer and about the short term and COVID-19. And as a coach, you were in a unique position. I think you're in a unique position to comment on COVID-19 and the decision to play and how you think the decision is playing out nationally, not necessarily at Penn State or maybe the Big Ten's decision, but if you were in the situation that some of our leaders were in, thinking, should we play, shouldn't we play? How were you thinking about that when we were going through that decision-making process?
Well, when the Big Ten originally agreed or decided to postpone the season, and a lot of people took the word postpone to mean cancel.
Right.
And to the Big Ten's credit, I know President Trump at one point tweeted that he was going to make sure we played. And it's really, without getting into the politics of that, it was really unfair to the Big Ten, because from the moment they said we're postponing the season, they were working. There were 3 committees, one on the medical side, one on the return to competition side, and one on the scheduling side, that were working on this. So this wasn't because anybody prodded them. That was their goal all along. But I supported what they came up with based on the medical information they had in front of them. I felt very strongly they were making the right choice. And also, having been a coach, you got to err on the side of caution when you're dealing with young people, because we just didn't know. Nobody knew. And now, as it's played out, it's still very, very difficult. The cases are spiking. You're seeing games canceling. Ohio State may not get into the Big Ten championship game if they don't play this week and next week. Michigan's in a very unique opportunity because they could have a spike and then Ohio State can't play them next week, and then all of a sudden Ohio State's out of the Big Ten championship. And how does that come into the playoffs? So, and you look at the SEC; they've had a number of games canceled, and they're moving games all over the place. And the Pac-12 is scheduling games 4 days in advance, so it's been a really chaotic thing. I think in some ways, short term, it's great to have the football. Long term, we just hope you don't do damage to the sport itself, because you're really creating a chaotic environment for fans to follow. And I just hope we get everybody we're able to fill stadiums next year again, like we want to.
Yeah, as a fan myself, right? I started thinking about a variety of different scenarios that could happen. You had the group of schools that was playing, right? And then the group of schools that decided to postpone, and some were talking about spring. And I immediately went to, and maybe you can give us some insight on this, would we need 2 different sets of rules for those schools, right? Because I know the NCAA, in terms of recruiting, their calendar is pretty strict, right? There's recruiting periods, there's signing periods. If we were going to be playing football after January, wouldn't that have cut into some of our time when we by NCAA rules couldn't be practicing according to the way the rules were set up, or couldn't be talking to our players at that time?
Well, it would have affected recruiting, because usually January and February you're on the road recruiting. So if you're playing games, you can't be in high schools, you can't go visit kids. Right. So that becomes very difficult. And generally you're signing most of your class now in December, but those months in January and February, you're finishing up that class because you're going to pick up a couple kids usually in February, but also you're getting out and seeing juniors. So that puts you behind the 8 ball for the next class. So I'm glad we played in the fall. Right. I think.
Yeah.
It hasn't gone as that's not to be. how would we have been better off? Would this team have been a little bit more mature, a little older, playing in the spring may have worked out better. But, again, it's one of those years. But yeah, definitely would have required some adjustment to the calendars.
Yeah, absolutely. You said that a lot of the recruiting happens in January and February, and I know I've talked to Tom Bradley before, and I know we have touched on this. That football season, high school football season's over by then, right? So you're pretty much relying on tape that you've watched. But that Tom would always talk about this. He'd like to go to see kids wrestle, and he'd like to go see kids play basketball.
Yeah.
And that helped them. That helped him identify, whether that was a player that he wanted to go after. He told the story about recruiting LeVar Arrington. Did you find that helpful when you were on the road watching some of the athletes you were recruiting play other sports?
Oh, no question. When you're recruiting wide receivers and defensive backs, basketball is one of the best, even running backs. Basketball is one of the best things you can see them do because it's change of direction. It's athleticism, all kinds of things, jumping, running, catching, all that kind of stuff. Tight ends the same way. Tom went up to see Shane Conlon, who came down to his two final schools were Penn State and Edinburgh. And Tom saw him play basketball. I kid you not.
Right.
Tom saw him play basketball, came back and said, "This guy's we got to get him." And he was like the last guy in the recruiting class. Allen Robinson, who's with the Bears now. Ron Vanderlyn saw him play basketball because Michigan and Michigan State didn't even know about him. And Ron went out to watch him play basketball, and we got him. And you can go back. Jack Ham was that way. Joe went down to see Kurt Warner play basketball. There's just numbers of guys like that. I mean, I can't tell you how many times over. I went to see LeBron James play basketball, but I knew we weren't going to get him. But I went to see him play anyway because I had an excuse to be out there.
Right.
And easily the best basketball player I've ever seen in high school, which, it doesn't surprise anybody. But I'll tell you what, he was a heck of a football player.
Jay, as much as coaching and helping develop young men into leaders was a passion for you, it seems like connecting with people through writing has also been a passion throughout your life, especially going back to your time as a collegiate columnist. Talk a little bit about how you got interested in writing as a way to connect with people.
It's one of those things. When I was in school and I had to write, I hated it. And the minute I was writing what I wanted to do, when I wanted to do it, I really started to enjoy it. And the written and spoken word, which are two things that I really spent a lot of time doing. I think, it's a lost art in some ways because now with Twitter and social media and all those kind of things, people want everything in a 280 character bite. And I think we're losing that. We're losing that ability to really understand and gain understanding and nuance from one another. So I always find that a real challenge, and I enjoy that challenge. I like putting things together, and I, even on my weekly columns or blogs, I'd sit there and should this word be here or this should be here, and I'm moving stuff around, and I find that really, really fascinating. But I like the ability to, potentially inspire people, to give them another point of view, give them something that maybe they haven't thought about. And that's always the goal I set out with. When I sit down to write this, I want to give people something that they have not seen before or a different vantage point or whatever it may be. And when I wrote the book about my dad, it was that way. I wanted to give some people things that they hadn't seen. And when I wrote the book Hot Seat, same thing. I want to take people into something that they really don't have a chance to see or understand and give them some understanding.
I want to talk about both of those books. Your first book, Paternal Legacy, is one of the highest regarded biographies of your father. It's one of my favorites. I remember reading it back in 2014 and having to put it down because I was getting emotional, and so I'd have to walk away from it and then come back to it. Those of us that have been lucky to, and the book is great, right? The book is great from stories to kind of the football aspect of it. But I think what I love most for those of us who've had strong relationships with our fathers was the relationship that you had with your dad. As I read it, I thought it was an incredibly vulnerable act of yours to allow us to kind of go on the journey of mourning with you. How did the book help you kind of come to grips with your loss?
That's a great question, Paul. And I'll tell you, my dad's death was so public.
Yeah.
It was, the night before he died, it was reported that he had died. So, my dad's laying in a hospital bed and I have to go across the hall and tweet that my dad's still alive. So that was tough. And then he died, and it was, we couldn't let anybody know until we got my mom out of the hospital because there were cameras outside and things. So it was very, very public. So, and then immediately you go into a viewing, like 50,000 people come to, and I'm there greeting people. And then you go in, and all that time I have to write a eulogy that's going to be at the memorial service, the public memorial service. It's going to be on network TV and the whole 9 yards. And you're sitting there going, never really a chance to deal with some of the things and really come to grips with it. And so even months later, because of some of the other things that had gone on, I still really hadn't had the time to sit down and really understand, and like, gone. I can't pick up the phone. So I started to write the book, and that was really helpful. And there were times I'd be in my den at home writing, and I'd be laughing almost hysterically out loud, and my wife would kind of poke her head and say, "You okay?" And then a day later I'd be in there bawling, and she'd say, "Are you okay?" I said, "No, I'm writing this book." And and she knew I was writing it, so it really helped me go through that quite a bit. And I gave the book to all my brothers and sisters and my mom before I sent it off, and I said, "If there's anything here you don't want, tell me." And nobody really said anything except my brother Dave. There's one story about him involving cut on his head and some feminine hygiene products that he used to stop the bleeding when he was very young. And he said, "Can you take that out?" I said, "There's no way I'm taking that story out." So that story is still in the book.
Yeah, that's funny. I've gotten the chance to know David. David's been a great volunteer for the university as well. He served on alumni council for a number of years, but I can hear that conversation and kind of big brother saying there's no way I'm taking that story out.
No way.
So, hey, we're getting a lot of questions. So I want to go away from some of the questions that I have for just a second and get to some of these. And I want to know this one too. What's the story with the Buckeye hat behind you?
Oh, it's part just because of the book. So it was one of those things that I've had that for years. Hold on, I'll tell you why that's here as well.
Yeah.
This has been on my wall. And if you see Woody Hayes, so it's really a homage, or what, I don't know what the right word I'm looking for, but it's really kind of a tribute to him. On the other wall, I have a letter from Coach Bryant in Alabama. Whoop, hope that didn't break. On the other wall across the way, I have a letter from Coach Bryant in Alabama that I got when I was in ninth grade for National Library Week. We could write to anybody we wanted. And I love all those. I love the old coaches and stuff, but I've been fortunate. Across the years, I got to meet people like Eddie Robinson. I got to meet, a number of guys like that. Bobby Bowden, Nick Saban, Joe Paterno, obviously I grew up with. Tom Osborne, Bill Walsh, people like that. So I love the history of the game, and that's just part of it.
It's funny you bring up the letter that you got from Coach Bryant. In my role, I talked to a lot of like my colleagues. So one of my colleagues for about 10 years was Archie Griffin. So Archie was my counterpart at Ohio State. He was the alumni director. So we would go to conferences, and it was just regular Archie sitting there. And then my counterpart from Alabama just told the similar story that you just told about Bear Bryant. He said, after Penn State came down to play Alabama in, I guess this was in the 2000s when we went down there a couple times to play against them. He wrote a letter to your dad about admiring him and how classy he thought the team was, and how they just carried themselves, and how much he, as an Alabama fan, appreciated Penn State. And he has in his office your dad's handwritten response back to him framed. And so it's your dad, look, there's so many stories about that from your dad, from, your dad talked to me for 5 minutes at an event and gave me advice, or he wrote this letter back to me. And I always cherish that. You're probably hearing stories like that all the time.
Well, it's funny. The Coach Bryant letter has been in every office I've ever worked in.
Right.
And the day that we were playing Ohio State for win number 324 to break Coach Bryant's record, I took it off the wall of my office and I had it in my bag in the press box in the stadium while I was coaching. And we got down 27-9, and I looked at the letter like, come on, please. And we scored the next 20 points and won the game. So it was with me that day. Not superstitious or anything, just, I was like, okay, you need to be a part of this letter that's been part of my life everywhere I've been. But, my dad was very, very accessible. I think that's the one thing about him, was whether he was walking around campus or whether, he was, if students rang the doorbell, my mom would answer, and often he would come talk to them. And so, he was just that kind of guy.
Absolutely. We talked about the legacy book that you wrote. There's a question here from Dan. 20 years from now, if you could kind of look into the future, what do you think Coach's legacy will be 20 years from now?
Oh, I think it'll still be very similar in terms of he always wanted to challenge people, and was always looking to the next thing. And, he came to Penn State, and as he became a coach and started to really have an impact on the university, he always wanted Penn State to get better every day. And I think that's one of the things that is the challenge for this place. I think the other part will be the legacy, will be the players' lives he touched, and their children and their children's children, and the lives he created for so many other guys, helped them create. And we get into it. We're in an era now where people want to talk about diversity and inclusion and tolerance and all those kind of things. And, some of the things he did as well in that front at the university, I think hopefully will be part of his legacy too.
Absolutely. A couple questions about one, they want to know, in your role as a trustee, how's the search for a new basketball coach going? And are we preparing to hire a major name to get to the next level? I don't know how much insight you have on that process.
Well, we have not talked about that much just yet, because we're just trying to get these kids to play can we get the season in that we're in now? But certainly there's been a lot of suggestions already rolling in, and how much involvement the board will have, I don't know. There are still some questions as to what happened and why, Pat, the way it came out, because Pat had gotten us, in all fairness to Pat, he got us to that level that we wanted to get to. Unfortunately, COVID kind of ended that season, or we would have been in the NCAA tournament. We would have made I think we would have won a couple of games. And it's unfortunate that happened that way. But certainly we all want what's best for this basketball program as we go look for the next person.
And a lot of folks want to know, how's your mom doing? What is your mom up to nowadays?
She might actually be on here, so I don't know, but no, she's doing very, very well. What she's up to, well, it's a constant battle with her in the era of COVID, of making sure she's not sneaking out of the house when she's not supposed to. Right. And I jokingly said something about that, and she said, "Oh, we told you guys not to sneak out of the house, and you didn't listen to us, so why should I listen to you?" And she's she's still working with Special Olympics. She's still raising money for the library. She's still very involved at Penn State. Because she loves this place. I mean, in December of 2011, just a couple of weeks after all this had happened and my dad had been fired, they still, they donated another $150,000 to the university. My mom just gave $100,000 this past spring, $50,000 to the food pantry for students, and $50,000 for emergency funds. So she's still very much involved in it, and it's a tremendous passion for this university.
Absolutely. So let's go back to the book.
I'll say this immodestly about her.
Yeah.
When the history of Penn State is written, she will be remembered as one of the most consequential women in the history of this university because of what she's done.
There's no doubt about that. There's no doubt about that. Let's go back to the books. After writing the first book, this latest book is a fictional look into the life of a college football coach. How did this idea come about, and why did you decide to kind of stay on the fiction side of the ledger?
Personal safety was the main reason for staying on the fictional side. No, over the years, having conversations with people, and they're like, "What's it really like coaching? And what's this?" And you tell them some stories. You wouldn't tell people's names or whatever, but you tell them some stories, and people say, I don't. This is amazing. You ought to write this down. So I would make notes every once in a while. And I sat down and I said, my next, I said, I want to write another book and let's see what it is. And So I started to write it, and I realized I can't make this nonfiction and put names in because somebody's going to blow my house up. So I said, let's make this a nonfiction or a fiction. And just so that people know, telling real stories, but protecting the innocent and protecting the not so innocent and shielding the guilty from having their names in this book. And avoid lawsuits and all kind of stuff. But the vast majority of these stories are very, very real. They're things I was part of, things I witnessed. I think the thing that's unique about it is, there are these HBO shows or Amazon shows. They take you, behind the scenes in a football program, but they're not taking you in a coach's meeting when a player is accused of a crime or charged with a crime. They're not taking you into a coach's house where you see the stress of having to win and how that weighs on the relationship with his wife, because that's part of the book, and all these other things, and what it's like when the phone rings at 2:30 in the morning. Because I can tell you, when you're a football coach and the phone rings at 2:30 in the morning, it's not the academic advisor letting you know that 8 of your guys make dean's list. It's not that. And so, that's the reality of what you do as a coach. So I thought it would be an interesting to write that, and I've got a lot of great feedback. And one of the first people I sent a manuscript of it, the first half of it, was Urban Meyer, and he sent me a note back that ended up on the cover of the book, said awesome insight into that life, because he said, this is so realistic. You got to finish this.
Yeah. Amazing. If people are interested in getting a copy of their own, how would they go about doing that?
Well, it's on Amazon, which, what isn't?
Right.
You can get tire irons on Amazon. You can get my book there on Amazon. And then I also sell them on my website, jvpaterno.com. You get them signed and personalized to whoever you want. So you just, on the website, there's a spot where it says, do you want to sign personalized? And I still have Paternal Legacy books around too, if somebody has not read that and they want to read that. So both of those are available on Amazon and on jvpaterno.com.
Although you might have to send a couple more to Amazon. I was on Amazon last night, and the Legacy book, it said there's only one available on the Legacy book.
I'll tell Amazon to call me.
Absolutely. So let's see. We got some other questions coming.
By the way, I
here.
saw Andre Collins is on the call.
Okay.
So I just want to make sure I say hello to Andre. And Andre is one of the amazing stories at Penn State, and he is one of I think 5. Andre, Aaron, Jerry, Phil, Jason. Yeah, I think I got them all. Jason, 5 Collins brothers that played at Penn State, and I think that's the record.
Yeah, I was going to say there seemed to be a Collins on the roster for a decade.
Yeah, and then there was
different first names.
Another one, Ahmad Collins, who everybody thought was one of the brothers and was not.
Right.
And he kept saying, "No, I'm not related." He goes, "I wish I was, but I'm not." So
we had that with the Conlins too.
A great Penn State family. A great Penn State family.
We had that with the Conlins too, where I think 3 of the Conlins were all in the same family, and they wanted to put Shane in that family. And Shane would say, "I don't want to be related to Goon." So
no, and Shane was the best of the. No offense to anybody else, Shane was the best of the Conlins. But we would do in 2002. We had Larry Johnson, Tony Johnson, Brian Johnson, Tim Johnson, and I think we had one other one. So we had 5 guys, and only 2 of them were brothers.
That's funny. So we like to. So let me talk about this, because there's a question coming in here. First of all, we get this question all the time with the Penn Stater magazine, so I'm going to ask you it. Why is the print so small in the new book?
I have no idea.
I don't.
Is it that small?
That's
I
our
did not
response
realize
too.
that. You know what? I'll have to yell at them and tell them they want bigger print next time. So my apologies for the small print.
Yeah, people are wondering, and I know you've done some of this virtually, but do you have a plan for do you have a plan to go on a book tour when all of this is over to talk more about the Hot Seat book?
Yeah, we're actually talking to a couple different bookstores about how to do them virtually right now.
Right.
Because it's a challenge. And I was on one with Matthew McConaughey. He's got a book called Green Lights Out, which is kind of a memoir. It's a pretty fascinating book, actually. But he's doing them with bookstores. And so that's how we're going to kind of model what we're going to do. I know we're talking with the York Alumni Association chapter about doing one, but there's a couple of bookstores that have talked to this. So that'll happen in January and February.
Jay, what would you say about the continued support of your family from not only you of the books and alumni chapters having you go on virtual book tours? I know before all this, you were a frequent speaker on the chapter circuit. What would you say to all the Penn Staters that are tuned in here that continue to support you and your family and all of your endeavors?
Well, I think it's been very, very moving. And in regards to, it's been a number of years now. And, I haven't coached at Penn State since 2011, but I think it's very, very moving to, I know, my mom and to myself and to my brothers and sisters, that people still feel that passion towards what happened, towards, my dad's life and my mom's life more so than any of the rest of us. But and that they've inspired people. I think that's been the most moving thing, is the inspiration that people have drawn from my mom and my dad. And so, whenever I'm asked to do alumni chapter stuff, I do it. I think the last one was, I got back into State College right in early March, right before the whole COVID thing really hit. I did was in Tucson, Arizona, and they had a great turnout there, a great group. But I mean, I think I've done alumni events in 27, 28 states now, and over the years, and it's, but part of it is being a trustee now. I think it's vital to get in front of alumni as much as I can to get feedback from them, to understand their concerns. And, I get over and over and over about affordability and the challenges we face. And some of the things that we've talked about among trustees is we got to find a way to make tuition more affordable for out-of-state alumni to send their kids. Or is there a way we could give them in-state tuition if they start at Harrisburg campus for 2 years or whatever it is? We got to find ways to be really, really creative. And so those are ongoing discussions. And I think we owe that to our alumni, because, again, they're the biggest stakeholders in this university.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more with that. A lot of questions coming in here. We don't have time to get to all of these questions. I do want to ask you, though, because I find myself in this situation all the time now as a father myself. You have 5 kids. You have had some of your kids go through the recruiting process. But what I'm thinking about is, I hear my dad's words coming out of my mouth, and in some ways they terrify me, right? Because I didn't want to turn into my dad. Talk a little bit about that as it relates to your relationship with your kids, and maybe how the recruiting process has changed a little bit from when you were out on the road recruiting to how you've experienced that as a parent.
Well, my kids were all recruited to play lacrosse, and so it's a little different in terms of the football part of it. But at the end of the day, what you're really trying to do is get, especially with football, it's so high profile. Everybody and every fan is angry if a kid from Pennsylvania goes somewhere else, or we lose this kid to that guy. And at the end of the day, and I say this to my own kids, and it's right from my dad's mouth, we're dealing with people's lives. Find the place you want to go to school and play a sport. Right. That's really how it should go, because coaches will come and go. You may go to a great school with the best young coach in the country, and there's no guarantee that they're going to live. I mean, they could get hit by a bus, or they can leave the school, or whatever the case may be. So find a place you want to go to get the education that you want. And when I was coaching, that was really what you sold people on. It was, come to Penn State. We got Tony Hunt. Tony Hunt won the major communications. We got Michael Robinson. He won the major communications, and we had the best school. I still think we have the best communication school in the country. I know people at Syracuse will argue with me, but I look at it and I say the things that we're doing in our college communications right now are phenomenal. So we were able to sell kids on those things. I think, is that still going on in college football recruiting? I don't see it as much as it used to be, because now mom and dad they're looking at NFL money, and they're looking at 3 years and gone. And right. When kids are transferring more often, I think it's, recruiting is important. and it's changed, but I think retention is going to be the biggest challenge for coaches in the future.
Yeah, the fifth-year senior has become almost a unicorn, right?
Yeah,
Even
or
those
they
who,
jump schools their fifth year. You know, they go,
that's
okay,
right.
I graduate, so I'm going to go play another year somewhere else for fun. So, you know, I mean, it's bizarre. And you know, the biggest challenge that we're going to see is coming next year with name, image, and likeness. And for those who don't know, you know, next year, you know, there's NCAA legislation, there's federal legislation. Players are going to be able to capitalize on their own name, image, and likeness. And it's not just going to be commercials. It's going to be, you know, let's pretend, which is a great to pretend, that Saquon Barkley was still at Penn State and had 2 more years left, and was his,
Right.
but I mean, let's just say it. So, what do you think people would pay Saquon Barkley to show up for a Sweet 16 party or a wedding or a bar mitzvah? They probably, you know, you have alums that would write him $10,000 check to show up for an hour.
Right.
And he could line up 20 of those in the summer and walk out with 200 grand. So, I mean, that's coming. I think the other thing that's going to come is I think you're going to see revenue sharing in college athletics. You know, when you look at the TV revenues that are coming in now, I think, you know, and where's that money going to come from? We're going to have to readjust some things. We have to readjust coaches' salaries. We're going to have to readjust expenses because some of that money is going to go away, not just to football players. You know, if you took 30% of TV revenues and split them among all of Penn State's athletes, every athlete would get a $20,000 check. And people say, oh, $20,000. But if you're a walk-on the baseball team or a walk-on on the women's soccer team, whatever, that's going to go to your tuition, and that's a big deal.
Right.
And I think you want to do that. You want to do it evenly among all the sports. And I'll give you a question for you, Paul.
Yeah.
Do you know what football is the highest rated sport on the Big Ten Network?
Right.
Men's basketball is the second. You know what the third highest rated sport on the Big Ten Network is?
I would pick between two. I would pick between women's volleyball and wrestling.
It's women's volleyball.
Is it? Okay.
And if you've noticed, women's volleyball went from Friday, Saturday games to where now you would see them on Wednesday nights and Thursday nights. So now there's travel involved. So, you know, TV has changed everything. And I think that's going to be a challenge for us in the future.
So, Jay, we like to have a little bit of fun here at the end of coffee hour with what we call a lightning round. So I'm going to throw just a couple of quick hitters at you, and you give me.
I will try and give you lightning answers, Paul.
Okay.
It's hard for me. But.
All right. Well, this first one's going to be hard too, but because you've had so many. But your favorite Penn State memory?
Oh Jesus! You can't get that done in lightning round. Next question.
All right.
Pass.
Favorite class at Penn State?
Probably elections with Bob O'Connor, and I took that in '88 when Bush was running. So that was part, and then Gary Gallagher had a Civil War class, which was phenomenal, and he's now since gone to the University of Virginia. It was a big loss for us, but okay, those are two to jump out.
How about your favorite environment in college football outside of Beaver Stadium?
Oh, that would probably be Ohio State or Wisconsin. A night game in Camp Randall is really awesome.
Yeah. If you could have dinner with anyone outside of a family member, who would it be and why?
Oh, good God. Maybe Bono from U2, because I just think as a writer, his lyrics are just that would be one from a music standpoint. Because I've met other people, met Lyle Lovett, who I really admire as a musician, but Bono would be one I'd love to sit down and talk to.
So you've traveled all around the world. What's your most unusual We Are moment? Kind of the unexpected place where you heard We Are or ran into a Penn Stater that caught you off guard?
I went to the Middle East in December of 2018 and got off a plane in Abu Dhabi. And there was a guy in front of us, a young guy with a Penn State hat on. And the guy was traveling said, "Are you from Penn State?" He goes, "Yeah, I'm a student there right now, petroleum engineering." I'm like, "Okay, here we are. What are the odds of that?" Because the plane was coming from Dulles. We didn't get on a plane in Philly or anything like that. So that was probably the furthest afield of any We Are moments.
So your favorite Penn State sport besides Penn State football?
Oh, geez. Women's volleyball, because Russ, I just love Russ. Guy Godowski lives down the street. I love hockey games. Yeah. Those probably be the two that really, I feel like I can't miss. Love Penn State basketball as well. So, I mean, that's a hard question. Love lacrosse. I mean, don't you think all of them?
I know. And the way I answer that is it depends what season we're in, right? Whatever
There you go.
season
That's my answer.
is my favorite. So, your favorite flavor of creamery ice cream?
Coconut chip.
Coconut chip. Jay, that's all the questions that I have. I know we got a lot of questions coming in here that we don't have time to get to, but I just want to thank you for joining us on Coffee Hour. Thank you for all you do for the university and all your family has done for the university over the years. We're truly grateful.
I appreciate it. And you know what? I'm glad to see so many people involved. And if I just want to give one last plug, you know, the university is going through some very, very difficult times right now and challenges. And it's going to be more important than ever that our alumni stay involved and connected and really give their time to Penn State in their own chapters where they live.
Thanks, Jay. And thank you for everybody for joining us. I think this is a record over 240 people on Coffee Hour this morning. That is certainly a record for us. Thank you for supporting us. If you're a member of the Alumni Association, thank you for your support. If you're not, go out to our website right now and you too can become a member of the largest alumni association in the world. Visit alumni.psu.edu and you can become a member today. Thanks for all you do for the university, for the glory, and for the future. We are
Penn State.